What's up, guys? It was 3-3 yesterday. Got to learn how to control myself, how to restrain myself. But at least those last two MLB plays that I added, I knew that they were weaker, and I was like, I just put less money on those. So, hopefully, at least I made it clear that I thought those were less strong, at least, so you could act accordingly on those. So I actually had a slight win yesterday. I think even with the 3-3, it might have actually wound up being a slight win because one of the losses was a money line underdog that you play for less money, but whatever. Today, let's talk about today. NBA playoffs. The play-in the West is today. I mentioned I have a play on the New Orleans Pelicans. This is the earlier game. Lakers Pelicans. Lakers look like they have 74% of the tickets, 82% of the cash, so they're obviously public. I mean, they have LeBron, AD. Everybody just saw the Lakers destroy the Pelicans in this same matchup in New Orleans. Public's on the Lakers, quite obviously. I'm surprised that the cash discrepancy is on them, and the line has kind of moved around. It's been moving back and forth between Pelicans -1, Lakers -1, and sitting around a pick 'em. I think if you get any of those prices, you're basically just playing the team to win the game, so I think that's fine. I like the Pelicans here, even though the Lakers do have the experience. That's really the one edge that the Lakers have, is they have the playoff experience, but they're an aging team, man. LeBron is basically my age. AD, certainly not young. So the star players they have are getting up there in age. And I think last year they overperformed in the playoffs really last year. And they certainly were not a bad team, but making it to the final was a bit of a stretch for this team. And I don't see them making a run like that again. New Orleans, of course, they're the younger team, but they don't have the experience of the playoffs. They're new on the scene here, new to this experience. But at some point you get over the hump, man. And the other thing I guess I am a little bit concerned about is that New Orleans is actually better on the road than at home. They're one of the only teams that for which that is the case. They have like a reverse home road reverse home road dichotomy. So those are the things that worry me a little bit, but I think this is a zigzag. In NBA playoffs, man, the zigzag, when you have a lopsided result, and this is actually going from a regular season game into the playoffs, but I still think the zigzag applies here. Usually with the zigzag, and the books have caught up to the zigzag in a lot of cases, it used to work like a lot better in the NBA playoffs, which is really simply you get a really lopsided result in one game in a series, especially game one. People tend to overreact to that one result and want to be on that side again to do that again, whether it's a total or the side. And the books would have to adjust accordingly, but now the books don't over adjust as much anymore. So you can't find that really crazy overreaction in the line to it anymore. So you can come in and take the other side. But there's certain cases where it overreacts a little bit, and taking the other side is still the play that you want to go with. And one of the major factors is that the team that did really well in that game, it's like, what do you have to adjust after that? You have no adjustments to make because you played really well. The other team is the team that has all the adjustments to make. They played a bad game. They're going to come in and throw in some new wrinkles. And the other team, the team that won the first game in the lopsided fashion, might not be ready for it. I think, obviously, I'm saying that is the side of the Pelicans here, that they are in the spot to bounce back, to make the adjustments here. Lakers don't have the adjustments to make. And, of course, the winner of this game will get the 7th seed and have to play Denver. But I don't think these teams are going to be throwing this game intentionally. I would not have to imagine. The Lakers probably want another shot at Denver anyway, because Denver knocked them out of the playoffs last year, I guess. But New Orleans will also be motivated. I mean, these teams don't want to fall into a single game elimination scenario, and that's what happens. The loser of this game winds up in the one game elimination play-in, where if they lose that game, they're out entirely. So obviously these teams, I don't think that's going to be a factor. Teams will be motivated in this game. Pelicans, they had Brandon Ingram back in the prior game, and he didn't play that much. So I expect him to play more minutes here. So I think that's also a factor that could also help the Pelicans in this one. So I think that's also a plus for the Pelicans. They were just starting to work him back in. So any jarring changes they might have with trying to get him back in there kind of are already out of the way. And now they can kind of ramp up his minutes a little bit, work him back in a little bit more. And the Pelicans, they have good stats when they're off of like a bad home loss this season. I forget exactly what the stat was, what I saw, but like I think it was like off of a double-digit home loss or something like that. They're 13-6 against the spread in the next game or something like that. So that's pretty good. Although, of course, the spread here is basically just picking them to win the game. But the Lakers, they're on a streak right now where they've scored 120 or more, I think, in 3 straight games. And the Lakers have done that 4 other times this year. And every time that they've done that ensuing game, that next game, they lost all of them. They're 0-4 straight up and against the spread in those. And I believe they've lost by at least 16 in every one of those too. So those trends, I'm not really a huge trends guy, but that just kind of adds to the whole play here. Me being on the Pelicans, a couple of trends that point in that direction as well with the way these teams have tended to play this year. And then, as I was kind of alluding to with the zigzag, I think the line value is all on the Pelicans here. In the game on Sunday, the final regular season game, the Pelicans opened -3 in that one. Yeah, the line crashed down to 1.5, but the books were telling you that, hey, the Pelicans are actually the better team here. And what's changed since that game? Nothing really, except one blowout result, where that might even be misleading because the Pelicans might have just been scoreboard watching and seeing, oh, the Suns are blowing out Minnesota. So if the Suns won, the Pelicans would basically, I think, have nothing to play for at that point in that game. And that was the case. They probably saw that the Suns were winning in blowout fashion and then maybe even kind of packed it in early. So I would not put much stock into that blowout result. The Pelicans are the better team. If you look at like all the power ratings, the odds makers came out in the game on Sunday with the Pelicans -3 to open, telling you, hey, we think the Pelicans are actually the better team, even though the market came in against it. But that could have been a situational play to some extent as well, with the bettors coming in and playing the Lakers in that one. Now, the line has shifted a little bit more, where you're getting anything between Pelicans +1 and -1, still like short of where it was even when it closed on Sunday. I think it closed 1.5, so you're still getting a little bit of line value there. And I think even with the 1.5, even that I still think would be a line value because, like I said, the power ratings guys, all the sets of power ratings I looked at that are all pretty well-respected power rating sets, so the metrics, basically, they all have the Pelicans between like a 3 and 6 point favorite in this game. They all have the Pelicans being the better team. And I know you can't quantify like all the intangibles there, so maybe that would be like overstating a little bit, but I still like the Pelicans for all those reasons. In game 2, we've seen a lot of line movement between the Warriors and the Kings in the 9-10 matchup. The Warriors have flipped from a 1-point dog, it looks like, to a 3.5 point favorite. They're also public, and they also have the cash discrepancy, but I really don't want anything to do with the Kings here. But the line has gotten out of control. Like, I think if you played the Warriors at somewhere around a pick'em price, you got the best of it. You got a good number there. They have 84% of the tickets, 94% of the cash, it looks like right now. The line movement looks very strong on the Warriors side. I kind of agree with that. I think the Warriors are indeed the better of these two teams. As when the line came out, the line was already telling you the Warriors are actually the better team because the Kings are at home and the Warriors are still the team with a little bit of the edge there. This is actually a repeat of last year's playoff matchup, though. So will the Kings be a little bit motivated? Because the Kings lost that series at home. I think it was the 3-6 matchup in the playoffs last year. Kings were the home team, but they were the worst of the two teams back then, too. Warriors got the best of them there. So I don't know. The Kings, I think, are worse this year than they were last year. And the Warriors' record is actually better than it was last year, although I think they're probably about the same as they were last year, I would say, as far as how good they are. So nothing to quite take away from that. But I think it's possible the Kings have some revenge motive, but the Warriors certainly have more of the experience as well, obviously. They still have Curry and all those guys. The Warriors, the guys that were on those championship Warriors runs are still on that team. So they do have an experience edge there with that Warriors team. So I would not really want to get on the side of the Kings here. And it looks like the totals have both dropped from 228.5 in both of these games down to 224 or 223.5. So a ton of movement coming in on the under in both games. And I think that makes sense as well. I'm not going to get in on it at the worst price, but I do agree with playing the under at some of the higher total numbers there. Of course, I mean, I agree with the line movement on those, but when you get like a first game in the playoffs, usually you get intense defense in that first game. That applies to like game ones in series as well, when the teams are starting the series and they both haven't played yet. Usually you get intense defense. The teams have had a little bit of rest, so they can so they can put in the effort to play more intense physical defense. So usually, generally, you see lower scoring games in game one and then higher scoring games in game two, where there's a quick turnaround time. The teams are kind of tired after that first game. That's just kind of a general thing to look for in NBA playoff series, but the books do also adjust to that phenomenon. So Pelicans -1, I guess, or around a pick 'em. You can get them +1 probably right now, whatever you want there. NHL, I'll make one play in this one. It's going to be on the Philadelphia Flyers. I think I got a decent number on this one. Let me see. What did I get on this one? I like the Flyers motivationally here and the rest spot from the -135. I think is what you can get right now. They're up from -140 to -145, it looks like, as a consensus. Now, with 61% of the tickets over on the other side of Washington. So the public likes Washington, the team with the slightly better record here, over Philadelphia, even though. So I guess they think, these teams are kind of even. Washington maybe slightly better. We're getting them as an underdog, I guess. I don't know. 52% of the cash on Philadelphia, though. I like Philadelphia here, man. I mean, they are fighting to get into the playoffs. They're behind Washington. This is a battle right now, man. I mean, the Islanders have almost, I think they actually did. They clinched a playoff spot now, the Islanders. So I think it is possible that they still fall into the wild card, but they are looking pretty good right now, the Islanders. So Washington's sitting in the second wild card, 3 points behind the Islanders. They are tied with Detroit and Pittsburgh, or tied with Detroit, 1 point ahead of Pittsburgh and 2 ahead of Philadelphia. So Philadelphia, I mean, you could argue that the pressure is on for Philadelphia. This is a similar game to that Pittsburgh game yesterday, I think, where I think Philadelphia is going to have the extra motivation here because you got Washington played yesterday and Philadelphia didn't. So Philadelphia's got the rest spot as well, but I think they're going to have the extra motivation because this is their last home game of the season. I think it might be their last game as well, playing the final home game, and they want to avoid elimination here. So I think you're going to see an all-out effort from Philadelphia here and being the team with rest. So I like Philadelphia. There's a reason why they are favored. Those would be the reasons why, even though they did win their last game. It was kind of an ugly-looking game, I guess, with a 1-0 final against the Devils. Scoring only 1 against the Devils is pretty poor. The Devils typically giving up a lot of goals. Washington played yesterday, and they had a big win over the Bruins, man. So they're coming off back-to-back pretty big wins over Tampa and the Bruins, over 2 playoff teams to maintain a playoff spot right now. And they do have to have motivation because they know they're still hanging on to that last playoff spot barely. But, I mean, both of these teams are fighting to get in, and Philadelphia is the team that's just a little bit more on the verge there. And I don't just like play. You can't just blindly say, well, this team needs to win, so they're going to be the team that you want to play. But in a case like this, the market looks like it's in agreement with it. Philadelphia does have the rest edge as well. They have the extra motivation of it being a final home game in Washington. I think it's kind of in a bad spot, coming off a couple big wins and having no time off. So all of that, I think, puts you on Philadelphia in this one, even though the pressure is also going to be on them. Hopefully, maybe even they're thinking, we're almost out of it at this point. So maybe they're thinking that maybe they just won't make it anyway, which might help them play like a looser style game, whereas Washington's more in the thick of it a little bit. So, I mean, both of these teams do kind of need to win this game. The need is just stronger in Philadelphia, but when you're playing a money line, like I said with Pittsburgh yesterday, even though you are laying a price with them, you're still just saying, win this game for me, and that is what they're motivated to do. So that'll be that play. Moving on to Major League Baseball, where I got to control myself a little bit. I will say that I do lean to Tampa, although it looks like the line has crashed against Tampa. I think Savale definitely has an edge over Jose Soriano, who's pitching for the Angels there. So I do lean to Tampa, at least with the starting pitching edge there, and Tampa having lost yesterday. A little bit of a bounce back spot there, and I think the starting pitching is a little bit of a mismatch there. I also like San Diego. It looks like they've gone up, although they are a public road favorite there. They did win yesterday as well, so I don't know if there's going to be any like bounce back motivation from Milwaukee. Milwaukee played a bad first game of the series yesterday. San Diego was coming off a pretty big series over the Dodgers, though, and a big win in the night game on Sunday on ESPN, too. So San Diego was in kind of a letdown spot yesterday, and they still did pretty well and won that game. But I don't know what you can exactly take away from that. But I think Dylan Cease, pretty good pitcher. He's had a pretty good strikeout rate this year. So I like his numbers a lot better than, I don't like Wade Miley, who's pitching for Milwaukee. He didn't even have a strikeout in his first start, even though he didn't give up that many runs. No strikeouts. I mean, he's not a guy coming in like fooling people. He's a junk pitcher. He's old at this point. I think Cease, the younger guy with the way better stuff, I like Cease in that matchup. I don't like the bullpen scenario quite as much for San Diego in that one. And the fact that they're a road public favorite, but the cash discrepancy does look like it's on San Diego. So that almost made a play for me on San Diego. I do kind of like that one. First game I'm going to be on, you know what I'm doing, man. Jared Jones, Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm going to keep riding this guy until it runs out. That sounds pretty gay, but man, I like me some Jared Jones so far. I've been on all of his games so far this season. Actually, he did let me down in the last game. What am I saying? They did lose his last game, but in his last game, he still had 8 strikeouts and no walks. He just gave up 2 home runs, which was kind of unfortunate. Other than the 2 home runs, which meant that he allowed 3 runs, pretty good start for him. Jared Jones, man. He's got 25 strikeouts and 2 walks on the season so far in 18 innings, and he's only allowed 15 hits. So the fact that he's allowed 8 earned runs because he's allowed 4 home runs, he's just got to keep the ball in the park a bit, and his numbers would be as good as they should be with the fact that he has a 25-2 strikeout walk ratio. He's dealing it, man, right away as a rookie, as a newcomer to the major leagues. He's got a .94 whip. That's very good as well. The 4 ERA is misleadingly high just because of the home runs that he's allowed there. But other than that, he's really he's kept these opposing lineups down. He's done it against a couple of pretty good lineups too in Philadelphia and Baltimore. And then although they lost both of those games, unfortunately for them, but I was on the under in the Baltimore game. So yeah, gotta win there, and I gotta win his major league debut against a pretty bad Miami team. But Jones, I mean, he's yet again in a spot because he's a major league rookie. He's in another spot where this opposing lineup has never seen him before, and he's got good stuff. So again, I think that's going to give him an edge early on in the game against these Mets hitters in this case. So I like that aspect of it. I like the fact that the Mets won yesterday. So this is going to be a little bit of a bounce back scenario for Pittsburgh. Mets are in a better spot in yesterday's game, in my opinion, than they are here today. And I think Pittsburgh, they started out, I think it was a little bit of a misleading start to the season. I mean, they beat the Marlins. They swept the Marlins, not a very good team to open the season. Not to take that much away from Pittsburgh because they have been playing pretty well, but I think their record is overvaluing them a little bit. And we saw that yesterday with the Mets team with the worst record. The Mets had kind of flipped a switch and turned it on after a bad start. So I think you were getting value on the Mets yesterday. But now that the Mets have won that game, and I think they really obviously don't have the edge in the starting pitching matchup here either, I think that you look to the Pirates instead in this one. Even though the public might, I'll look at the market in a minute, but the public might actually, I don't see anything in the market, so I'll just skip that. The pregame isn't showing anything on this right now, although you can find Pittsburgh at plus 112 out there right now, so you know that they're actually an underdog. So you're getting Pittsburgh with the better pitching matchup, and I think maybe the bullpen's even in a slightly better scenario. You're getting them as an underdog. All right, give it to me, I guess. The Mets yesterday both of these teams used 4 relievers. Both of these teams kind of used some of their better relievers. And Aroldis Chapman actually got thrown out of the game after he surrendered the winning 3 runs to the Mets. So not a great scenario there, but maybe that'll fire up the Pittsburgh team a little bit. He's not going to be available in this game, unfortunately. But, I mean, that game kind of wrecked his stats on the season. So I don't know if I'd want to see him today anyway, if he's a little bit of a loose cannon. But the Mets also used the back end of their bullpens. Like some of their best relievers all got into the game yesterday. So the bullpen situation, I think, is a little bit of a wash. Both of these teams are kind of without some of their best relievers coming into this one. So then looking to the starting pitching matchup, obviously, I then like Jared Jones a lot more for the reasons I just stated. He's up against Jose Quintana, and I am not a fan of Quintana. Quintana actually was on Pittsburgh 2 years ago, and he had a decent season with Pittsburgh back then, but his overall stats, they're not bad, but his stats over the last few years, I mean, he's in a decline, and he's not a guy that comes out there and just throws high heat and blows people away. So he's not the type of pitcher that I tend to like to look for. He's been basically on a decline since, I would say, noticeably since about 2018, maybe even going back to the 2017 stint that he had in the first part of it with the White Sox before he switched over to the Cubs. But then the other seasons with the Cubs, like I just alluded to, weren't good for him either. Had a bad season with Anaheim, and then also a bad season with San Francisco. Well, that was mostly with Anaheim, and then he finished the season with San Francisco and had bad stats there too, but it was out of the bullpen. Kind of had a little bit of a resurgence in 2022 with Pittsburgh, but then they still actually wound up getting rid of him, and he actually pitched well for the remainder of the season against St. Louis. But then last year, good ERA for the Mets last year in 13 starts, so not a complete season, but his whip was 1.31. His strikeout rate, again, wasn't very good. His strikeout rate on his career, he doesn't strike out that many guys, and his walk rate is just too high. I mean, he had a 2.5 strikeout walk ratio last year, has a 3 for that on his career. And looking at his stats against Pittsburgh, I mean, they're pretty good, but they have seen him a lot. So there is that sample size. So there is familiarity there. So I'm going with the Jones unfamiliarity aspect to it, and the fact that I think he's generally a better pitcher than Quintana. Although the Pirates hitters are only 14 for 70 off of Quintana with a 20-5 strikeout walk ratio. So he has been definitely good against them for 200 batting average and 525 OPS. So that does worry me a little bit, but I still prefer Jones in this one for all the reasons I just said. Pittsburgh has at least seen Quintana enough. They know what's going on with him, and I believe he is the pitcher that has the way worse stuff, and he's the much older pitcher at this point on the back end of his career as kind of a junk pitcher. You know, I like to go with the guys that are the fastball pitchers, the high heat, the guys that can strike people out. That is Jared Jones, so that's where I'm going. In that one, Pittsburgh plus 112. Kansas City and who are they playing? So the White Sox. Oh, yeah, two bad offenses. This is the same matchup that I played yesterday, playing the under. Oh, I'm going to play the under again in this one. It's two bad offenses, and I think that the pitching matchup is very similar to yesterday, so I'm just going to go back to the well and do it again. It's worked out for me. I don't want to jinx myself, but I've won on every full game under that I've won on every full game total. I've only played one over, but I think I'm now like 7-0, 8-0 on full game totals with almost all of them except for yesterday, or except for that over 2 days ago, all of them being on unders. Won every single one of them. So let's continue that trend, man. I'm going to be the Undertaker once again in this Kansas City Chicago White Sox matchup here. And it looks like 57% of tickets on the over, but 94% of the cash on the under. It looks like at some point it opened at 8.5 and it came down to 8 with juice to the under. I was still able to find a straight 8 at minus 110. So I think that's probably still available, kind of the way that you can do that there. I like that. I'm not even going to comment on the side really in this one, I don't think, but you'll hear what I have to say about both of these starting pitchers here. I like the under again in this one, man. It went under yesterday significantly, a 2-0 win for the Kansas City Royals. Wound up being a decent debut for Nastrini. He did not pitch poorly in that game. Lugo pitched quite well for the Royals. Both starting pitchers did well, which is what I expected. The White Sox did use 4 relievers, which worries me a little bit. The Royals only used 2, but they did use their closer. But the back end of their bullpen they used yesterday, guys with ERAs in the 5s and 4s, not really the best relievers, or the Royals, I should say. But the Royals, I mean, their bullpen's just not that great in general. But I went full game under yesterday. I still think there's reason to go full game under in this one as well. Just get that extra, those extra runs on the total there. Even though the books obviously know what they're doing. But it looks like there might even be some 7.5s cropping up in this game. So the money is coming in on the under here. And I'm in agreement with that for very similar reasons to yesterday. Although the White Sox this time, like I said, they did use 4 relievers yesterday, and some of their better relievers, although one of them is Kopech. I don't know how to pronounce it. He is a guy who's kind of, I consider him to be a more long relief type of guy because he has been in the starting rotation before, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know what he's doing kind of pitching in the back end, but at that point they were losing the game. So I don't know if they just kind of said, and just go in there and like finish the game off, pitch an inning. I don't know what the thought was there, but I'm going to kind of, just ignore what these teams did with the bullpens yesterday. The White Sox didn't use them for that many pitches. Well, yeah, I mean, they used them for about 60 pitches, I guess, and the Royals only used theirs for about 30. So the bullpen scenario, I think, is all right. Starting pitching is where you really get the edge here, though, with Brady Singer pitching for Kansas City. his stats don't look good on his career, but he's been dealing it this year, man. I think maybe he's improving a bit. I mean, you kind of saw that back in 2022. He had a nice whip. Even in his first season in 2020, both of those years he had a good whip. And then for some reason, 2021 and 2023, he backslid quite a bit. So it's like, is he just bad every other season or something? So this season is going to be a good season for him? I don't really know. But he does have one start against the White Sox already this year, which, of course, was a good start. His best start was against the Twins. So both of those teams are bad offensively. But then he did have a pretty good start in his most recent start against Houston, too, stepping up in class, facing a better offense. And he didn't pitch poorly in that game either. This season, he's got 18 strikeouts and only 4 walks in 18 and third innings pitched, and has only allowed 10 hits. And he's allowed 2 home runs, which is kind of even that's making his allowed run total maybe even higher than it should have been otherwise. He hasn't allowed any runs besides those 2 solo home runs. Those are the only runs that he's allowed on the season. That's pretty good, man. So he's been pretty much keeping the bases quite clear, which is pretty good. 0.76 whip and 0.98 ERA. He's been good this season, man. So right now he's, I think, in a groove, and these White Sox hitters in a large sample size don't have good numbers against him. 27 for 130, although they do have 5 home runs against him, but he has a 29-3 strikeout walk ratio against them too. So again, besides those home runs, he's really held them in check to the tune of a 239 batting average and the 29-3 strikeout walk ratio. So he's been good against the White Sox. And then on the other side for the White Sox, Jonathan Cannon is making his major league debut. He's only 23. He's a 6'6" guy, so a pretty intimidating presence on the mound. I don't think he's as good as Nastrini. Looking at this, the scouting reports on him, Cannon, I think he's got a cannon. I think he's a bit wild. He throws mid to high 90s with his fastball, which is pretty good because that means he can come out and throw fastballs by major league hitters with speeds like that. But I think he has some control issues, but even still, making his major league debut, he might be fired up for it. He's facing a lineup that isn't one of the best lineups in baseball, and they haven't seen him before, so that's an advantage to the pitcher, as I always say, of course. So I like it. It's similar to yesterday, man. So I'm going to take the under in that one, and then to finish it off, I'm going to play St. Louis minus 130 in the first 5 innings on this one. They are down from minus 145 to minus 140 to win the game, full game on the money line as a road favorite against Oakland, who is one of the worst teams in baseball. Of course, so I'm playing on games involving the worst teams in baseball, the White Sox and Oakland. Yay. This is an interleague matchup. Lance Lynn, he's pitching for St. Louis. St. Louis has 75% of the tickets, 95% of the cash. So they do have the cash discrepancy on them, even though it looks like the line has gone down a little bit. I'm not going to bother with the full game on this one because I looked at last night's game. St. Louis won the game 3-1, and they used the back end of their bullpen. So I'm just going to kind of take the bullpens out of the mix in this one, even though I don't even think the bullpen is in that bad of a scenario, really. They used like their 3 best relievers yesterday, though, to save the game, including Helsley, their closer, whereas the A's only used 2 relievers and kind of saved most of their bullpen there. A's, I mean, what are they saving really with their bullpen? I don't think their bullpen is really that good anyway, but I'll still just take it out of the equation because it's hard to know what to expect after these starters are out of the game. And Lance Lynn has not pitched deep into games this year. He's an old guy now, 36. He's only gone 4 innings, 4 2/3, and 5 innings on the season so far, but he does have a 2.63 ERA, but a 1.39 whip is really not good. A lot of that is because he walked 4 guys in his last start against Philly, but he didn't even allow any runs, or he didn't allow any earned runs in that game, and he only allowed 1 hit. So, I don't know, he's been kind of all over the map. I mean, he gave up 8 hits and 4 runs. He gave up 3 home runs against an awful Marlins offense, but he had a 7-1 strikeout walk ratio in that game. So what can you even glean from what he's done this year? I mean, he has 18 strikeouts and 13 2/3. 6 walks is too high, but that strikeout walk ratio is good. The strikeout rate is good, and he's allowed 3 home runs. So if he keeps the ball in the park and like limits the walks a little bit, I mean, his numbers would be significantly better. I don't think he's a very good pitcher overall. Those career stats actually aren't too bad. His career strikeout rate is actually pretty good. He's got a career 666 walks. That's not good. 666. I mean, that is too high as well. With a strikeout rate like that, his strikeout walk ratio should be a little better, but He's also facing an A's lineup who aren't very good, and they only hit him to the tune of 243. That's 9 for 37 off of him, and he's allowed 3 home runs to them. So again, it's too many home runs, but only one other extra base hit, one double, and he has an 11-0 strikeout walk ratio against him. So he, aside from the home runs, again, just like I said with Singer is who I was talking about, I think he's held him to a low batting average, but he's just allowed too many home runs, and he has a good strikeout walk ratio against these A's hitters. So I like Lance Lynn in that one to a decent extent. I like Lance Lynn for once. Oh, God, help me. Because usually I look to go against him, but he's up against J.P. Sears. Sears, I mean, the public is, of course, going to be on St. Louis. I mean, the team with the better record. The A's suck. They know that Lynn has a better ERA than Sears, although Sears has a better whip. So you might say, well, wait a minute. Doesn't that mean that Sears is actually the better pitcher? Nah, I'm still going to say no because it's way too small of a sample size. He does have a 5.17 ERA, 1.21 whip. But look at Sears. Look at what he's done this year, man. 15 2/3 innings. He's allowed 9 earned runs, which is quite bad. Only on 2 home runs, which is also not great, really. But he has 7 strikeouts and 6 walks. That's a terrible strikeout rate and terrible strikeout walk ratio. So all of that is worse than Lance Lynn. And then what puts this over the top for me is his best start was his most recent start against the Texas Rangers, the best offense that he faced probably this season. He faced Cleveland, who has a decent offense, and then Detroit, who I don't think is very good. He faced Texas, really stepped up for that game, even though he did walk 3 guys in that game. He only gave up 1 hit, and he had a no-hitter into the 7th inning in that game. And then once he gave up the hit, they kind of pulled him from the game, even though he was only 88 pitches deep. They let him try to go for the no-hitter, and then they said, all right, that's enough. And they took him out. Sears, not really that good. When you have a pitcher who's not that good, and they're coming off like one of their better career performances like that, and they took a no-hitter into the 7th inning against a really good team, the defending champs like Texas, and they took that into the 7th. I think they're ripe for a letdown spot in the next one. Playing against these not very good pitchers and they have no hitters or near no hitters tends to be a good spot to do so. So I'm going to fade Sears, do it in the first 5 innings, or really focusing on the starting pitching matchup there. And on his career, his stats are just not very good, man. A 4.4 ERA, 1.27 whip isn't that bad. It's similar to Lance Lynn's, but his ERA in his career is higher than Lynn's, even though he is a younger guy and he only has 1 full season really on his career so far, which is last year. Not impressive stats. Walk numbers way too high. 82 walks and 258 innings pitched. Only 219 strikeouts, so not a good strikeout rate. Walk rate too high. Strikeout walk ratio not good. For all those reasons, St. Louis minus 130 in the first 5. So those plays one more time in hockey. In hockey, Philadelphia minus 135. Philadelphia Flyers, excuse me. In the NBA, New Orleans Pelicans, pick them or -1 or whatever you can get out there. And then in baseball, Pittsburgh Pirates plus 112, Kansas City and Chicago White Sox under 8, and St. Louis in the first 5 innings money line minus 130. Or if you wanted to play the -half run line at like plus money, plus 100 or whatever, I kind of wouldn't mind that either. But I'll lay the money line just so then if it winds up being tied through those innings, it pushes. But hopefully they aren't losing through those innings, and you actually lose more money on the bet. That's going to do it for me, man. Have a good one. Peace.